EU finance folk. Welcome to the EU Finance Podcast. My name is Aidas Palubinskas, and I am your host. Here's a question. If you had a few hundred, maybe even a couple of thousand euros sitting in a bank account with very low returns, what should you do with it? Invest it, presumably. Put it to work somewhere it could actually grow. Now, multiply that by millions of European households, because that, roughly, is the scale of European household savings currently sitting in low-yield bank deposits across the EU. 10 trillion euro. That's with a T. Not fully doing the job it could be doing. Such as making money financing the next big European tech company, European defense, or the green transition, or the infrastructure Europe needs. Even if a small share of those 10 trillion savings could be invested in capital markets, it would significantly expand financing options for EU companies and make money for the investor, possibly you. And what about a lot of the savings that Europeans do invest? Well, a significant chunk ends up going to the US. Not because Europeans don't want to invest in Europe, they do, but because our markets are so fragmented, so divided into 27 different national systems that American markets look more attractive and come with bigger returns. This is the paradox at the heart of European finance. We are a continent of amazing savers with a chronic investment problem. Fixing it is what the Savings and Investments Union is all about. Launched by the Commission in March 2025 and already followed within 9 months by a raft of concrete measures, it's arguably the most ambitious attempt to complete Europe's single market for financial services since the Capital Markets Union project began more than 10 years ago. And it builds directly on a report that set the agenda for much of this debate. Much more than a market. Written by today's guest. And today I'm joined by President Enrico Letta, former Prime Minister of Italy, President of the Jacques Delors Institute, and the man whose landmark report has done a great deal to shape the thinking on the Savings and Investments Union. Let's invest some time in this. President Letta, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for the invitation.
It's good to have you here. Let's start from the beginning. And you're a great person to ask because you are indeed the author of this very, very famous report on the single market. Can you take us through that process? What problems were you trying to solve and what surprised you the most during your research?
The key point was the fact that we didn't discuss on single market leftovers integration for many years. And it was because we had a period, some decades in which crisis after crisis, the financial crisis, Brexit crisis, migration crisis, COVID crisis. Then at the end of the day, we left the structural integration of the single market the day after the creation of the euro. And in reality, when we created the euro, we understood that three main subjects of single market were not integrated at all, and we postponed year by year. And these three were energy, financial services, and connectivity. And suddenly, when Russia invaded Ukraine, when Trump started being aggressive with Europe, in Europe we understood that we have to be more independent. But to be more independent, we have to be more integrated. And in reality, these three fields are not integrated. So my main mission is make people in Europe aware of the fact that if we are not able to integrate these three, all our mission or our call for independence and autonomy is really without any possible positive exit strategy, without being integrated in that, in these three topics, it will be impossible to be successful. This is the main problem. Then we have to move to integrate. But if awareness is not there, it's very complicated.
Okay, let's turn to what the Savings and Investment Union means in practice. Let's say for someone not following Brussels or the EU very closely, let's say a sheep farmer in Lithuania, though my dad's a sheep farmer in Lithuania and he does follow the EU, but just as an example. or a small business owner in Pisa. All of this about capital markets and about the savings and investments union can sound pretty abstract. Is this really for these people, for normal people, or is this really more for the financial industry?
This is exactly the point. In the past, we tried to discuss about financial market integration in Europe, and it was too much for financial people. In reality, it is for the people. And the lack of integration of financial markets at European level is one of the weaknesses of European competitiveness, and it affects the people. Business people everywhere, but also workers and citizens. You know, we have the same currency and we have 27 financial markets. What is the consequence? The consequence is fragmentation, lack of scale, and the fact that in the interconnected today's world, the Americans are leading in finance everything, and we are lagging behind. We are not able to have enough scale to be successful. Your friend in Lithuania, my friend in Pisa can tell us, I don't care about scale. I want to live in my small town. I don't need to be in big giants. I prefer to be at I would say, low scale. And I can answer, it is not the right way to think, for the very simple reason that today, in the world, there's a big fight for influence on topics, subjects, where we are very much interested in Vilnius and in Pisa. And these subjects are AI, are security, big tech. On these subjects, the global influence is a big fight among continents. And with Europeans, we are followers today. We are not leading. With Europeans, we were always rule setters. And today we are becoming rule takers. Why? Because being fragmented on these topics, the scale of investments that we can put, for instance, on AI, on security, are not enough. And we are not secure, and we are followers on AI. Take AI. AI today is the big tool of the present and of the future, but everything is American, everything is Chinese. Why? Because they were able to put a lot of money there, and we weren't. Why we weren't? Because we were fragmented. And so all the big innovations are coming from the US and from the Chinese, and we are taking these innovations, we are using this innovation, but this innovation are talking a language that is not a European language. Only small innovations on AI are European, and we, the Europeans, we are using the American one. And I have to say that it makes a difference, because if we are not good on AI, we will have a lot of problems in competitiveness for the future. And we are not good on AI, not because we lack competences in Europe. We lack money. We weren't able to invest enough money, and the Americans were able to do so. So my point is that the lack of one financial market in Europe instead of 27 financial markets is refraining us to be leaders on topics of the future, like security, like AI. And it is a problem not only for the banker, it's a problem also for the user of the bank. It is a problem for the SMEs, is a problem for students, for professors, for local authorities. This lack of scale today is a problem for us, for the Europeans. And if we are not able to reverse this trend, having big investments, and to have big investments, we need to have integrated financial markets. Otherwise, the investments will arrive from abroad, and we will not able to be competitive enough.
I'm going to push back a little bit on one thing that you said. You said that we couldn't make those investments. I would argue that we wouldn't, or we didn't. Because when you look at it, a mind-boggling 10 trillion euros, that's trillion with a T, in European household savings are sitting in banks, earning very little returns and sometimes no returns, instead of being put to work in the European economy. Europeans are historically fantastic savers, but we tend to be more cautious than the Americans. Is it realistic to expect ordinary people to invest more through things like the savings and investment accounts or supplementary pensions without making them feel like they're taking on too much risk?
That's a very good point. And this is a problem of, first of all, narrative. It's a problem of telling clearly our people that we are using badly our savings. We are for mentality, for behavior, old behaviors, maybe because of the legacy of the financial crisis that was very tough in Europe. We used to put our money under the bed. And this is not the way in the world of today to make our economy more competitive. And if you add the fact that these behaviors are aside with fragmented markets, where all the actors are national, you don't have European actors. You have national actors. And if you have national actors, the dimension is small by definition. So the main point is we have to transform the asset that you mentioned, that is the fact that we are great savers, into energy for our real economy. This is why the term savings and investments union. Nomina sunt consequentia rerum, said once Umberto Eco. And it is true. The names, they have to be linked to what they want to say. And in this case, the point related to the use of savings has to be related to the transformation of savings in investments for our common goods. What does it mean? It means that our savings are badly invested, so they give us bad returns. The American savers, the Chinese savers, or other savers in the world, they have better returns. So first, good point for savers. Thanks to the Savings and Investments Union, they will get better returns. Second, good point for all of us. If we transform these savings in energy for real economy, we will have more infrastructures, more digital, more sustainability, more security, more AI, because we will be able to leverage this money and not to leave this money sleeping in bank account. Sleeping money means sleeping economy. This is what is happening in Europe. Sleeping economy because we are not able to invest enough. And I repeat, the example of AI is the best example. The best European engineers visited the US and brought their ideas there because they found there enough money to all the inventions and in investments. What we didn't do in Europe because of this lack of money. So creating the Savings and Investments Union and creating the Savings and Investments account means giving better returns to savers and transforming our savings in future big investments. And that is fundamental in the world of today, in which, by the way, there's another big problem. That is the problem that public money is scarce, more and more scarce. And we can't imagine that all our investments are made on public money. What the US did on AI was the product of big private money investments. And this is the reason why we have to change our mind and we have to be more long-term oriented. You mentioned pension funds. It is the other big point. Because of demography, our children, young workers will have very, very bad pensions in the future. So we have to start immediately creating secondary pensions, and using these savings with institutional investors. It's a fundamental and unique possibility to have all these big investments in security, in infrastructures, in digital. Otherwise, we will declining. And this is, I think, the main problem that we have in front of us. We can't continue with this leaping economy. Otherwise, decline is there.
But there are people who do invest, and your report, for example, notes that a lot of European cash leaves Europe, and it leaves our financial markets and oftentimes goes to the United States. And as you mentioned, one of the reasons probably is because our financial markets are too fragmented and we're not efficiently channeling money into European investments. When you talk about removing barriers, removing barriers to the single market, what are those barriers and what does fixing them look like? For example, a European startup that finds it easier to expand or to go to New York or Silicon Valley instead of expanding in the EU or expanding in a neighboring EU state.
The main proposal that I put in the report has the nickname of the 28 regime. And today the Commission bought this idea, changing the name. I agree with the change of the name because there will be one day a 28th member state. Iceland, Montenegro, Albania, North Macedonia will be the 28th. So my idea was to use 28 regime as a sort of nickname to say we take one country that is not an existing European member state, we elaborate business law, corporate law, easy for this country, for this virtual state, and we make this corporate law valid everywhere in Europe. So you start with this 28 regime and you can go everywhere in Europe without changing corporate law. Today, if you start Lithuanian or if you start Italian, you have to change when you have to go in Sweden or when you have to go in Spain. If you start European with the 28 regime, you can go in Lithuania, Italy, Portugal without changing. And that is an enormous accomplishment, a big improvement for the European business environment. The European Commission bought this idea and launched the project named EU INC, EU Inc. And that is a proposal presented some weeks ago. Now the co-decider, they have to decide on how to adjust and approve, I hope, very fast, this proposal. So it is in the hands of Parliament and Council. But can you imagine telling our startups, young investors, young entrepreneurs, you have finally a common role at European level. Today in Europe, the risk of a Babele is enormous because we have 27 business laws. In some countries, you have the regional differences. So for an investor coming from abroad, also for a European entrepreneur, is absolutely a mess. So that is a first demonstration of what does it mean eliminating barriers and giving common rules and a level playing field. It's one tool. For me, is the most important one because it is giving also the sense, the narrative, saying that we give you a passepartout, we give you a fast track. In the US, they have the Delaware system, and Delaware is, we say, more ambitious, historically stronger, but at the end of the day, it was decisive to create the unified market in the US. This is a first step, fundamental, but there are many others. The Commission is working on how to have an integrated supervisory regulation and authority in the different markets. If we have 27 point of entry, if we have 27 supervisory authorities, is another fragmented and very complicated issue for investors. So if we start creating really the same unique market of financial services, that means we are going in the right direction. So these are just some ideas on how this new system can work. I think we are in a good direction, and we are I am full of hope of the fact that finally we can realize this idea, and this idea is today fundamental. And I repeat, one point is for me essential, is the fact that people with today's pressure from abroad, from Putin on the one hand, the American administration on the other hand, the Chinese assertivity on the other hand on manufacturing, we have to be more independent, we have to be more autonomous, and we have to be simpler. And this is the way to do so.
So it sounds like you're confident or optimistic that the 28th regime is gaining traction.
I can tell you one thing. When I prepared the report, I visited all the member states. And this idea went and more interesting. I tested the idea in the meetings I had from Vilnius to Coimbra, from Athens to Dublin. When I presented the report, the leaders at the European Council, I listened, and this point was the most popular one. And I can tell you that they asked me to have a second tour Europe, presenting this idea. So I met all the business people, all the universities, association of citizens, and this idea of the 28th regime was the most popular. So I'm very happy now the Commission bought it and presented the proposal. Of course, we are in Europe. We are not at the White House when someone is signing an executive order and it's done. We are in Europe, we need consensus, and we like this way to respect all the ideas and all the minorities. But I hope they will be fast in the application of that. Otherwise, the big risk is the frustration, is to say something that so popular and so easy to understand, like the 28th regime, if it is blocked because of political bureaucracy or political fight, it is a frustration topic, and it is the way to show that Europe is not able to reform. I'm sure that Europe is able to do so, because in the moment of crisis, the European institutions were always good in finding the right solution, even with the present treaties. All my report is conceived and implementable with the present treaties. I say that because I would like to change treaties in some topics. I don't like unanimity in foreign policy or in defense. But if we start today opening the Pandora box of treaty changes, it will take years and years, and we don't have time. What I would like to put at the center of all the reflections is the sense of urgency. We don't have time. We have to recuperate this 25 years of non-integration, and we have to do so now, because the rest of the world is running and we are just sleeping.
Mm-hmm. You a little bit earlier, you mentioned supervision, and I'd like to come back to that. Because the Commission's market integration and supervision package, which has recently been put forward, gives ESMA, the EU's financial market regulator and supervisor, much more direct power over financial markets oversight. It seems that you would say that that's the right move. Why has it taken so long? Scale is clearly the goal here, making it more attractive to list in Europe rather than New York. But why would a member state that's doing well under the fragmented regime say, yeah, okay, I'll get rid of my advantage and agree to unite and to have common rules?
This is the point. The key problem is the fact that countries that are having an advantage on this fragmented regime are not big countries. So the advantage is small compared to what we lose as a whole, as a European Union. So my point is that we have to find a creative way to organize unified supervision like the one we have in central banks. We have the ECB in Frankfurt, but the ECB is working closely with the national banks in the national capitals. The national banks are not cancelled. They are there and they work under the control and in coordination with the ECB. I think we can do something similar with ESMA becoming the ECB of the financial markets, with the national authorities having ground and room for some activities where it is important to leave the relationship on the ground. But what is fundamental is to scale, and so to give ESMA the power on the biggest. And today is not the case. ESMA is a coordinating activity, authority is not, and I think this is going in the right direction. So I like the proposal of the Commission on that. I like very much also the proposal of the Commission on pension funds. I think it goes in the right direction. So in reality, the Commission is shaping this idea of savings and investments union in the right way, because it is putting the different pillars. Now we need these pillars put in place, implemented. Savings and investments account, supervisory authority, pension funds and complementary pensions. All these are the pillars of a new world in which Europe can be a financial superpower. Today, we are a financial colony of the US. And frankly speaking, we can't afford the world of tomorrow with this minority on one of the most important topics for competitiveness.
Professor, I know that you're super busy, so this is going to be my last question. And I think it matters a lot right now. You've already talked about it a little bit, about the international environment becoming increasingly difficult to predict. Europe needs to do more on its own defense, on its own green transition, on tech, on AI. Does that external pressure actually make it easier to get member states on board to agree on financial integration? Is the turbulence we're living through finally creating the political will to finally get this thing done?
It's strange to say, but my answer is yes. This pressure from abroad is creating problems because it is obliging the European institutions to find and to have answers on the immediate crisis. Take this energy prices raise in this very period. But at the same time, it pushes European leaders to understand that we need structural reforms to be more independent and more autonomous. Because it is clear that the period of the happy dependencies is over, and these happy dependencies were a sort of suicide for us. We were dependent on the US on security. We were dependent on tech. We were dependent on finance. We were dependent on the Russians on energy. We were dependent on Chinese on manufacturing industry. These 2 decades of happy dependencies were the way for us to avoid to look at the true problems. And today we understand that we have to break these dependencies, not only because we are breaking them, but because the others are breaking. The US are breaking, the Chinese are breaking, the Russians are breaking. So,
well, the Russians are always breaking anything, so
it's easy for them. So this is why I think we are today aware, and this is why the last years are years of this awareness, this new awareness. I think the European institutions tasked our 2 reports, my report and Draghi's report, because of this new sense of call for action and autonomy. And today we have to be fast because if I may say, is the last opportunity, is the last chance to do what we didn't do in the last 30 years.
Mr. President, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. I learned an awful lot, and I have always been a fan of the Capital Markets Union and the Savings and Investments Union, and I think that your report has really given a really big push forward and a very positive push. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, here's my take on this. The thing that strikes me most in this conversation is how much the argument has shifted. For years, the case for integrating Europe's financial markets was made primarily as it would be nice to have, and in technical terms, harmonize this directive, converge that supervisory practice, etc., etc. Worthy stuff, but not exactly gripping. What's different now is the urgency and the political framing. Now it's a must-have. 10 trillion euro doing nothing. Savings leaving for the USA because our markets are too small and too fragmented to compete. We are in a world where Europe needs to fund its own defense, its own green transition, its own technological future. We simply cannot do that without a functioning capital market at scale. That is a different conversation, and it's one that finally seems to be getting through. The SIU strategy is out. The market integration and supervision package is on the table. ESMA is getting real teeth. The 28th regime is being discussed seriously and is gaining traction. It all still has to go through Parliament and Council, but the direction is clear, and the political will feels, finally, genuine. As always, there's lots more information in the show notes. If today's episode was useful to you, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who still thinks European capital markets are for somebody else or somebody else's problem. They're not. They're quite likely a better long-term solution for many of us, saving for the future and for building our European economy. That's all for today. Thanks for being with me. It's appreciated. Until next time, bye.